Some endings in history aren't just the end of a person or a family, they're the end of an era, an order, and a world. Such an end, magnificently and brutally, befell an imperial dynasty that reigned for 300 years. They were the Romanovs, the last leaders of the Russian Empire. But their end wasn't just a political collapse, it was also a tragic story filled with intrigue, betrayal, and endless bloodshed, starring a father, a mother, 5 innocent children, and a peculiar clergyman. Let's examine in detail how a dynasty was founded, how it grew into a vast empire, and how it perished on one of history's darkest nights, rather than the rise of a general. But before we get to the video, the development of our channel and the creation of more great content depend on the support of our valued viewers. Please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. The end of an age of turmoil. The story of the Romanovs begins with the reign of Tsar Nicholas II. It began long before Nicholas II in 1613. Russia was experiencing a period of civil war and anarchy, known in history as the Smuta time of confusion. In this chaotic environment, which also saw the involvement of Poland and Sweden, the nobility and the people united in a search for a new leader. At the end of this search, a young nobleman, Mikhail Romanov, was elected and became Russia's new Tsar. Michael restored stability to Russia and founded the Romanov dynasty. However, the real breakthroughs came with the leaders who came later. The most important figure in the dynasty was undoubtedly Peter the Great. Peter, who ascended to the throne in the late 17th century, implemented radical reforms to transform Russia into a modern European state. He reorganized the army and navy according to Western standards, improved education, moved the capital from Moscow to St. Petersburg, which he established on the Baltic Sea, and completely transformed the country. Peter's successor, Catherine the Great, expanded the empire's borders, making Russia one of the most powerful actors on the world stage. For 300 years, the Romanovs made Russia one of the largest and most powerful empires in Europe. This dynasty ruled a vast swathe of Eurasian territory and built a unique cultural and architectural legacy. However, at the heart of this magnificent empire lay the immense inequality created by a large nobility and millions of peasants living in poverty. This inequality was the main source of the political and social tensions that would lead to the dynasty's demise. The tragic fate of the last Tsar and his cursed family. The end of the Romanov dynasty, in contrast to this long and glorious history, was a tragedy. When Tsar Nicholas II ascended to the throne in 1894, the Russian Empire still had a medieval structure. Industrialization and modernization lagged behind those of Western Europe, and the vast majority of the population lived in poverty. Nicholas was far from being a statesman capable of governing this vast and restless empire. On the contrary, he was a shy and introverted man, deeply devoted to his family and faith, preferring to focus on his family rather than on matters of state. However, beneath this innocent exterior, the first omens of his rule were already visible. During the celebrations following his coronation, over 1,300 people were crushed to death in a stampede on the Kodinka field, where thousands had gathered. This incident would solidify the public's belief that the new Tsar was a sinister figure. Nicholas's attendance at a ball that evening, despite this tragedy, painfully illustrated his detachment from the people. The Romanovs' tragedy culminated in the birth of their only son, Alexei, the future of the dynasty. Unfortunately, the young prince carried hemophilia, a genetic condition that prevented blood clotting and could cause even the slightest wound to be fatal. At that time, there was no cure for this disease. This situation drove the Empress Alexandra to despair. She was ready to do anything for her son, and this despair would bring one of the most peculiar characters into the Romanov court, Grigory Rasputin. This enigmatic cleric from a remote Siberian village managed to stop Tsarevich Alexei's bleeding with his own unique methods. This miracle, which even doctors found hopeless, transformed the Empress's faith in him into blind devotion. Rasputin now became the protector of the palace, the Empress's spiritual guide, and one of the most powerful figures in Russia. His influence was felt in every sphere, from political decisions to the appointment of ministers. However, Rasputin's reputation outside the court was filled with stories of immorality and corruption. He was known as a holy man, but was also known among the public as a drunkard and a pervert. This situation further damaged the already fragile reputation of the monarchy, portraying the Tsar and Tsarina as puppets of a mysterious charlatan. Rasputin's presence was one of the key factors in igniting the revolution. The Russian aristocracy mobilized to destroy him as quickly as possible. On a cold December night in 1916, he was invited to the palace by a group of nobles. He was first fed cyanide-laced wine and cake, but the poison had no effect on Rasputin. He was then shot repeatedly with a pistol, but he remained alive. Finally, he was thrown into the river, gravely wounded, and froze to death. When his body was found, it was found that he had water in his lungs, indicating that he was still alive at the time of his death and had died of drowning. Rasputin's death itself became a legend, but by then it was too late. His last words were said to be, "If I am killed by the nobility, the Romanovs will be destroyed within a year." His prophecy would come true. Just a few months after Rasputin's assassination, everything fell apart for Russia. The devastation of World War I accelerated the end of the Romanov dynasty. Russia had suffered the heaviest losses in the war. Millions of soldiers had perished on the front lines. The economy collapsed, and the people were struggling with hunger and poverty. The people's patience had worn thin. The Tsar's biggest mistake was taking command of the army and leaving the capital. This decision made him personally responsible for every failure on the front. In his absence, the country was ruled by Tsarina Alexandra, under the influence of her mentor Rasputin. When the February Revolution of 1917 broke out, it was too late for Nicholas. Demonstrations that began in St. Petersburg quickly spread as soldiers joined the rebels. Under duress, the Tsar was forced to abdicate, marking the end of the 300-year Romanov dynasty. He was no longer just a former Tsar, he was a prisoner. First imprisoned in their palace in Tsarskoye Selo, then in the Ipatiev house, a merchant's house in Yekaterinburg, Siberia. As White Army units approached the city, the Bolsheviks, fearing the Romanov family would be spared, issued one final order: execution.
Господи, прости их, не ведают, что творят.
On the night of July 16 to 17, 1918, the family, Tsar Nicholas, Tsarina Alexandra, their four daughters Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and their young son Alexei, were taken down to the basement of the house, accompanied by four loyal servants. They had gathered under the pretext that the White Army was approaching and needed to be taken to safety. When the basement door closed, a group of executioners awaited them inside. Commandant Yakov Yurovsky read the execution order, and the guns were fired. A horrific massacre ensued. In the first hail of bullets, the Tsar and Tsarina were killed instantly, but other family members and servants were wounded. The girls were protected from the bullets by the precious stones and jewels they had sewn into their corsets. The rest were killed one by one, with bayonet thrusts and subsequent bullets. The brutality was so great that some bodies were unrecognizable. After the execution, the bodies were loaded onto a truck and taken to a nearby forest. They were acidified beyond recognition and buried in two separate mass graves. The Bolsheviks long denied the massacre, but the bloody basement walls and the story of a lost dynasty would forever whisper this painful truth. For years, a rumor circulated in the basement where the family was murdered, in the forest where the bodies were found, and even around the world. Anastasia had survived. Years later, a woman named Anna Anderson emerged and claimed to be Anastasia, the Tsar's daughter. This claim remained a mystery for decades and became the subject of numerous films, books, and documentaries. However, in 2007, the remains identified as those of Alexei and Maria, thought to be missing, were proven to belong to the entire family through DNA testing. Thus, the myth of Anastasia's survival was put to rest. The tragic story of the Romanovs is not only the fall of an empire, but also a lesson in how power and authority can destroy a family. Their tragic end has gone down in the dusty pages of history as one of the bloodiest and most unforgettable events of the 20th century. Their fall also marked the beginning of the modern world. We hope this video has helped you better understand this tragic chapter of history. You can find the sources we used in the video's production in the description section. Your support for our channel is crucial for more great content. Please like the video and don't forget to subscribe. Stay well and see you in the next video.